Good morning, everyone. So to continue with our story time, this week we're going to read Monster Stew by Mitra Motoresi. Now, this is basically a fairy tale, which fantasy fairy tale doesn't seem like it from the title, but it goes along perfectly with our summer reading program theme, which is Imagine Your Story. So, Monster Stew. Once there was a prince named Thugmund, who was his parents' pride and joy. Nothing was ever too good for their son. One day, Thugmund told the king and queen, "I would like to get married." They were delighted. "We must find you a princess." There's Thugmund with his parents, quite the handsome young man, or I should say young monster. But Thugmund already had someone in mind, his very best friend, Griselda. His parents were dismayed to hear this. "Certainly not," said the queen. "She's no princess," said the king. Thugmund was disappointed. In his eyes, Griselda would make a perfect wife. They both loved romping with their pet lizards and picking toadstools in the royal caves, and they always had fun together. But it was true. Thugmund sadly admitted, "She's not a princess." "Don't worry, son. We shall find you one," promised the king. There's Griselda. Lovely lady. As they were the only royalty in the area, the king and queen wrote to kingdoms far and wide, hoping a princess would respond. Finally, one did. They invited her to visit right away. The glorious day came at last, but when Thugmund met the princess at the castle gate, he was shocked. There stood a dainty, delicate girl with golden hair and a gown of silk and satin. Not Thugmund's type at all. His parents looked worried, and so did the princess. "Shall we walk in the garden?" Thugmund asked politely. The princess agreed. He showed her all of his favorite plants, but she did not seem to like them. Walking his lizards. She didn't even admire his bug collection. That is a shame. Look at his bugs. They're pretty large. At dinner, she barely touched her plate. What kind of a princess doesn't enjoy a good swamp stew? Wondered the queen. Good question. What do we think? Does that look good? Would you eat that? The king and queen had a talk in private. "Perhaps this is not the right girl for our son," the king said. "Well, we must be sure," the queen said. "I once heard that the true test for a prince's pride is to place a pea under a tower of mattresses and see how she sleeps." It sounded odd to the king, but he agreed they should proceed with the test. This is sounding more and more like one particular fairy tale. Does anybody know what fairy tale this is? Princess and the Pea. The next morning, when the very cranky looking princess came downstairs, they asked her, "How did you sleep?" "Dreadfully," the princess snapped. "I'm black and blue all over. It's as if I'd been lying on a bed of rocks." And with that, she stomped out the door. "My word, and all because of a tiny pea," said the queen. "A girl so rude and fussy could never make Thugmund happy." "Agreed. Indeed," agreed the king. "The pea has proven this girl to be unworthy." Off she goes. Again, Thugmund asked, "Couldn't I maybe marry Griselda?" This time, his parents thought it over. "Well," said the king, "if Griselda can pass the test that the princess failed, then she is good enough for our son." And so she was invited for a weekend. Griselda was delighted, but she had been smitten with Thugmund for as long as she could remember. She arrived at the castle in her best outfit. Thugmund was pleased. She's looking lovely. They spent the afternoon fishing in the swamp that they're catching. Then they joined the king and queen for dinner. "She's a little wild," the queen whispered to the king. "Yes, but such a healthy appetite," said the king. When it was bedtime, they showed Griselda to her room. Now we shall see if she's right for our Thugman, the king told the queen. Griselda was thrilled to see the mountain of mattresses. She wasn't at all sleepy, so she climbed the steep, steep bed and jumped up and down until she almost reached the ceiling. At last, when she was worn out, Griselda crawled under the covers and fell happily asleep. The next morning, when Griselda bounded downstairs, the king asked, "And how did you sleep?" "Like a log," she answered truthfully. The king and queen rejoiced. She hadn't felt the pea at all. This was the girl for Thugman. "So polite," the queen said. "So good-natured," the king approved. "So sturdy," Thugman glowed. And so it was with his parents' blessing that Thugman asked Griselda to marry him. She gladly accepted, and together they lived happily ever. So that's the end of that fairy tale, but now we're going to move on to another one called Beans. Wonder what this one's going to be like. Once there was a grumpy giant monster who lived in a castle high in the clouds. He spent his time counting his riches and guarding them from burglars. This is sounding like a very familiar fairy tale. Put our thinking caps on and think about which one it could be. One day, he noticed that a bag of coins was missing. "Dreaded thieves," he growled. He tore through the castle, but found no one. For several days, he sulked about his lost bag of coins. To soothe his nerves, he decided that he would play his golden harp. But when he went to the cupboard, it was gone. "Curses," he roared. "Who dares to steal my treasures?" He turned the castle upside down, but saw no sign of the thief. The monster was determined that this would not happen again, so he set his prize goose that laid golden eggs out on the table and pretended to doze off. Sure enough, a little boy tiptoed out and grabbed the goose. Squawk went the goose, and the monster leapt to his feet. He was astonished to see such a small creature. "Aha!" he thundered. The little boy yelped and took off as fast as he could. "Halt!" the monster cried. "Unhand my goose!" The ground shook as he lumbered after the boy. The monster chased the boy out of the castle to a huge beanstalk that he'd never seen before. Down they went. The little boy reached the ground first and cried out, "Mama, bring the axe!" The boy and his mother began to chop at the stalk. What fairy tale is this? Jack and the Beanstalk? With a loud bellow, the monster thudded to the ground along with the beanstalk. When he opened his eyes, he saw two terrified little people backing away from him. "Ouch, my arm," moaned the monster. The mother stopped in her tracks. "Wait, Jack, I think he's hurt. We can't just leave him here." They crept toward him and peered down at his face. "Oh, the pain," the monster whined. The mother took another step forward and said, "I'm Mrs. Rumple, and this is my son Jack. Are you hurt?" "Well, of course I'm hurt," the monster snapped. "Not only that, but I'm missing one bag of coins, one golden harp, and my goose that lays golden eggs." "Jack," gasped Mrs. Rumple, "have you been stealing?" Jack hung his head in shame. "We were so poor, Mother," he said, "and we've had such a hard time keeping up the farm on our own." "That's no excuse. You apologize this minute," she ordered. Jack's getting a talking to for his bad behavior. Jack turned to the monster. "I'm sorry," he said. "I traded our cow for some magic beans. When they grew into a beanstalk that reached your kingdom, I couldn't resist taking a few things for my poor mother." "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" the monster muttered. "You've chopped down the beanstalk, so how am I going to get home again?" Why don't you stay with us for a while? Mrs. Rumple offered. You're in no shape to travel, anyhow. Well, if I must, the giant grunted. Jack and his mother helped the monster into their cottage and made a bed for him by the fire. He had to admit, it was very cozy. Mrs. Rumple brought him homemade soup and patched his cut and soothed his bruises with ointment. Why, this is rather nice, the monster thought to himself. Jack kept him company and entertained him with stories. As time passed, the monster grew a little bit fond of the Rumples. Soon his bruises healed, but every day he put off leaving. And every day, Jack and his mother said, "Oh, don't go just yet." It's kind of nice to be taken care of. The monster even started to help out around the farm. To his surprise, he found he enjoyed himself. The farm was once again a success, and Jack and his mother were grateful. "Won't you stay with us always?" they said. "We've grown to love you dearly." The monster realized that he felt the same about them. "Well, I suppose I could stay," he said gruffly, and the three of them lived happily ever after, their own little monster family. The end. I'll see you next week.